The Rule Zero conversation around EDH has absolutely exploded with discourse. A recent response by Mark Rosewater to a Saffron Alla tweet has had everyone upset or maybe happy or just really inquisitive as to the usefulness of a Rule Zero conversation based on feedback by one of the bigger voices and designers and just visionaries of the game talking against Rule Zero conversations. And I want to kind of break it down, talk about the usefulness of it, the discourse in general, and talk about it from all sides with the recent success of cEDH, where Rule Zero conversations are had or not had, and we can talk about the implicitness of that, and just honestly where the Commander Rules Committee is moving forward with the format in general. Now, the start of this is really with the banned and restricted announcement this past week. May 14 changed a lot, and in constructed environments, in tournament legal play, in Legacy, Vintage, and Pauper, the stickers and attractions are all banned, but not out of Commander, because notably I did say for tournament play, and that doesn't really count cEDH. cEDH tournaments are a little bit more homebrewy-ish, and they're definitely great for the community, but they're not official WPN tournaments. And so with those bannings, we haven't really had an update up until today regarding the use of stickers and attractions in Commander. Now, part of the article talked about how, especially when it came to Commander, it was said that there's no existing way to make a bunch of cards legal in Commander, but not in Legacy, which I think a lot of folks, and I kind of mentioned this in my past two videos, are kind of upset with, because you're literally the rule maker. You're the game maker. You can make rules, you can make formats, you can make just anything you need to do to make things fit. Now, obviously, there are considerations to be had around whether or not this is good for the player, the average viewer experience, the casuals, everything. But Saffron Alla tweeted out talking about how not a fan of this reasoning. It seems like most sets have a mechanic that doesn't work under the existing rules, so they make rules to accommodate them. If you need a way to bring cards into Commander without messing up other formats, just make one, Wizards. You have that power. And honestly, exactly what I just said here. And this tweet kind of just exploded in a bunch of responses, and namely the one that caught everyone's attention, because a lot of creators were on this, is Mark Rosewater specifically responding. You got to kind of go down these threads, and I'm going to link all this down below, where he says the number one complaint he gets from players about uncards. Now, again, this is specifically about those name sticker goblins and the attractions and just the things that are playable from these unsets, which largely, in my opinion, was a mistake, black bordering unsets. One of the many complaints he gets about those was that group wouldn't let certain players play with them. Many play groups, Rule Zero isn't a practical thing. Now that right there is a bombshell, essentially admitting to the fact that he has had experience speaking with other people about Magic where Rule Zero doesn't work, and that's been the fundamental basis for all of Commander. Regardless of if you play cEDH or not, there is an implicit understanding of Rule Zero. Now there's a lot of, I guess, real edgelords out there in the comments and just in various forums around EDH that say, I went to an LGS for 10 years and I never had to have a Rule Zero conversation. No, you're lying to yourself, because a lot of Rule Zero conversations, again, are implicit. You sit down at a table, you go to your LGS, and you ask, like, hey, can I get a game with y'all? What are the power levels you're playing? And that's kind of it. That's the Rule Zero conversation, asking what is the type of deck you're looking for. Or someone makes an offhand comment like, hey, we're looking for not really any combos. We're trying to create like a creature centric pod right now. That's a Rule Zero conversation. Or you sit down and someone says, hey, we're looking for something a little lower powered today. You know, we're playing precons today. That's a Rule Zero conversation, because you're establishing a groundwork of rules to then play around a framework, I should say, to which you can build the next hour or two of your experience playing the Commander format. And I think that's what's key here. There's always a Rule Zero conversation. So why doesn't it work? Well, it's when it gets more in depth. And I want to shout out to one of my fellow ambassadors here, who I think really articulated this point really well. So Queen Beth, Your Highness, Royal Silly Go at Queen O Cardboard, says that Rule Zero isn't practical if it's not supported and taught. It's also a lesson in consent and communication. So many players don't know how to describe their decks or what they want to do with them. It doesn't have to be a 3-hour conversation, but it should happen. Otherwise, you're very likely to have an uneven experience where players don't know what to expect, that leads to more salty experiences than uncards in their opinion. Now, Queen, honestly, perfect, just chef's kiss on that. I think what it boils down to, and it's not up to Magic's job to teach you how to do this, but there's a lot of ideas around communication methods and just group curation when it comes to EDH. Being able to communicate your thoughts, your feelings, your power level, your expression, everything through your deck and your personal isms, and that isn't taught in Magic. The Gathering is an implicit part of the game, but it's not taught how to optimize that gathering, how to make the gathering great for yourself while also looking out for others' needs. And I think that's where this Rule Zero conversation really needs to be taken. If done appropriately, especially in these implicit ways, these hidden ways, I should say, then it is done actually pretty well. It's a consent where you sit down at a table and someone says, we're looking for a lower power pod today. We're looking for no combos today. We're looking for pre-cons today. And that's the type of communication consent you're looking for. It doesn't need to be a conversation around, you can't play this card, you can't play with fetch lands, you can't combo more than 3 times. It doesn't need to be anything that crazy, but it does need to happen, because in order to create a group setting where certain things need to be met, where certain folks are looking for their own experience, and that's perfectly fine, because when you sign up for a constructed Night of Modern, you make an implicit non-conversational Rule Zero statement of, you know, a certain level of what you're expecting. By paying your entrance fee, you know the type of cards that you may run up against, the type of players you might run up against, and the type of experience you might have. But in EDH circles, that's a lot more casual and up in the air, because a lot of EDH events are free. You go to your LGS, you go to your kitchen table, and you're around a group of friends, around a group of strangers. But again, because it's so open-ended, everyone's looking for something a little bit different. Whereas in constructed events, a lot of folks are signing up for the same Rule Zero conversation, but in EDH, a lot of folks aren't. They're signing up for different things. They have different power level strategies. They have different ideas of what it means to be a 5 power deck between 2 people, and what it means to be an 8 power deck for others. An 8 power deck could be cEDH to some, while an 8 power deck to others could just be a simple 5 because you aren't playing Mana Crypt or something. But it's very important to know that Rule Zero is not working for these attractions and stickers, because a lot of people aren't a fan of them. And I think it just really points to the fact that ultimately this was a mistake. It was an experiment, and I think it's a good experiment to have. Pushing the boundaries of the game is really important to understand where these cards need to go, what you can do with design of future sets. Should we be bringing more dice back, more randomness, whatever? Or do we need to just kind of shelf this? Do we not need to go with the Hearthstone route in terms of the randomness that we bring into the game? And I think this is what that shows. We should move away from black bordering unsets and creating little acorn stickers and everything at the bottom of cards. We need to move towards cards that promote good Rule Zero conversations, and we need to foster these conversations in our communities. We need to be able to look at our fellow friends, our fellow EDH players, our fellow Magic players, and really work with them on their communication. If you're going with a friend, maybe help them communicate of their decks if they're having a little bit of trouble, if they're not used to doing things like this. They're only playing kitchen table and you're bringing them to the LGS for the first time, or you see someone being rather aggressive or unfriendly towards other people. You know, take some steps. Maybe it doesn't have to be you, but go to the local game store worker and work with them to try and speak to this person. It's important to foster an environment of open communication, because open communication is just net positive for everybody. Communicating your thoughts and feelings is not a negative thing. It's not a woke idea, by the way. It's completely fine to have your needs met as long as those aren't negatively affecting other people. It's perfectly okay to want a certain type of strategy in a certain type of game to not be allowed, assuming other people's consent to that. It's okay to have your wants being met, because the game is so diverse. The game is so open in terms of what you can play. And that's what EDH really exemplifies. You can play any commander, any strategy. You could take an aggro commander and turn it into combo. You could take a control commander and turn it into, I don't know what, like one shots or infinites. Like, it's very easy to do that because of the diversity of play. And you can do that at a higher level, play with more tutors. You can do that at a lower level where you have no way to find your infinites and you're just playing for value. And it's really important to have these Rule Zero conversations. And I think it's okay that it doesn't work when it comes to these unset cards. It's okay when it doesn't work for the mistakes of the game, but it's important to keep having these mistakes. It's important to keep trying, like the companions. So that was seen in many ways to mistakes to people. Heck, the Modern Horizons 2 Elementals seen as mistakes to many people, and the Unfinity stuff is largely a mistake. But what I will say, though, is with all this in mind, Jim LePage did say that, tweeting out earlier today, The next Commander quarterly update is scheduled to coincide with the release of Bloomburrow on July 29th. That's a long time, and I don't want people to be confused or speculate. We have no plans to ban attractions or stickers in Commander. And so with Mark Rosewater talking about how the Rule Zero conversation doesn't necessarily work around this whole sticker and attraction mechanic, it's interesting that Jim and the rest of the Commander community, or the Commander rules circle, says that they're not banning them, right? Because I guess the whole philosophy of the format that they recently kind of touched on, and I talked about in a recent video linked down below, where the philosophy is something that they want to push. I think they should be a little bit more open-minded for unbans. And I think it's okay that you don't ban these, because the Rule Zero conversation is very important to have. But again, as Queen mentioned, it's very important to also not do it in a very aggressive way. Have open lines, have open dialogue, and really be open to what other folks are hearing from you and what they want to do as well with their experience. Ultimately, what you signed up to do for a couple hours out of your night at a kitchen table or at an LGS, someone else has done as well in a very similar situation, but they have different extenuating factors outside of that that can lead to wanting a different experience. And I think the Rule Zero conversation should continue, especially in a cEDH environment. I think I've implied this already so far, but especially if you're playing cEDH, that essentially is a Rule Zero conversation. Sitting down for a game of cEDH is saying, I want to play high power, I want everyone to play to win, but I also want some of the mechanics of EDH there. And so that in itself is setting a groundwork for a Rule Zero conversation that is implicitly implied that everyone is signed up to. And it's kind of the blending of constructed Magic and the Rule Zero of EDH. And I think that's important as well. That is what is going to make Commander succeed. I think it's just really important to know that Mark Rosewater says that is one of the harder parts about EDH, and one of the more difficult conversations he had with other folks that have expressed their frustrations with Rule Zero. And I think a lot of creators themselves, like myself, have a very biased view of Rule Zero. We generally work with folks, other creators that are very open-minded and open to other Rule Zero conversations. But for the average player walking into an LGS or just working with their friends after a long, hard day of work, who might have more frustrated levels and some folks might be happier, more open, it can lead to a lot of different dynamics. But Rule Zero is one of the foundations of EDH. These type of conversations are very important to have, and for the millionth time, we need to continue to have them, or else the game will fail and just really lose its identity. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Have I just rambled on for too long? Is Rule Zero situation just gone on too far? Do we need to have an implicit just rules committee just writing down the law as to how we should run our Commander games? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I really want to touch on this topic, and I don't know, I think it's a big one. I think it's a very important one to have, because there's a lot of crazy things happening, especially with the release of Modern Horizon 3 coming up. The format of EDH will change again with all these influx of powerful cards, with all the affinity support, with all the colorless support out of Eldrazi. We're going to see a lot of decks just kind of really rise up to the top. But let's see what happens to the formats we love, and let's keep on playing some EDH.